Right, so this is the second video, rather the third video covering when this chapter is discussed and explained. The first, we started this, I think, last week, then we continued with that in this week's Tuesday session, and then in the morning we had the second session, and this is the third session in this week, actually, third video of this week, focusing on this chapter. So we stopped at this where I was explaining to you information processing theory of forgetting that according to information processing model, the information that we have received or the information that we have retained it and stored in a short-term memory will be lost. Even if the information is stored in long-term memory for a short while, they will stay in the short-term, long-term memory for a short while. If we stop using it after some time. So that is what they call decay process of memory, because it was not retrieved, it was not recalled, it was not used for that reason. The next is schema theory. Now, schema is a concept which is the cognitive development concept, and it says that the information that we receive, that information is stored in different schemas. So the analogy to understand schema is a file. So it creates a file. So if you are going to compare, or let me use the analogy of computer with the brain. So if your brain is a computer, so there are multiple schema. So if your brain is a computer, there are multiple files, and each file has a different content. And when you are tapping, for example, if you have opened a file on cognitive learning theory, so whatever new information is going to learn and you're going to type it on the computer, you're going to open the same file, which is cognitive learning theory. Or you might have another sub-file underneath it, which is information processing theory, right? So you might might have multiple chapters on that. Or you might create, whenever you're going to write something, you're going to open that file, and then you're going to add more information into it. So that is the analogy that I can use to explain to you schema. So we have this information received through our senses from the environment. And once the information is actually taken to, it has to be, the brain is in disequilibrium position, and it can come back to its equilibrium position only when the information is either assimilated or accommodated. So either a new file is created, or either the information received is actually assimilated or placed in the already created file. So that is, then the brain again comes into, there is no confusion about the information that is received through the senses or that has reached to our brain. So that is schema theory. So schema always organized meaningfully, as I said. So you create a file and all the information are stored there, and you arrange that information under, maybe you create some headings, you may create different subpages around it, right? Then each schema is embedded in other schemas. So each file is connected with other files. For example, whatever. So if your schema is what we call cognitive learning theory, there are lots of other schemas which might be attached to that one. It could be cognitive development theory. If you're looking at, then you might be connecting computer concept with it, input concept. So there are a lot of other things that you're connecting with this. So schema change moment by moment as information is received. So as you keep receiving information, the file that you've created, the schema that you've created, it keeps changing. It keeps up, the information continues to be assimilated, accommodated unconsciously as well. But you can only make sense, as I said, in cognitive learning theory, learning is a conscious model. So we consciously arrange and organize that information when we are paying attention to it. The only information will get registered in a schema to which attention is paid. The other one is going to be discarded after some time. It will not, because it will be there in short-term memory for a few seconds, then it will disappear. So your organized when incoming data reveals a need to restructure the concept. So if you need to restructure the concept, delete the old information and add new information. So that is restructuring, reorganizing the information. So this is a diagram. Now this could also be used by teachers. So now look at this diagram. Now this is a chart which explains that simple egg. Now it looks at egg in different perspective. It's kind, right? So we have different colors. So if you look at different colors, we have these three things, right? And then we have another aspect is supermarket find in cooler, right? So with what eggs are found in supermarket. So you have these kinds. So there are multiple aspects. Birds, eggs are related to birds. Birds could be feathered, could be winged, could be warm-blooded, all that, right? So there is a whole schema which is created. And within that schema, there are multiple schemas. This, for example, in this case, there could be a schema related to nests. So nests could be grass nest, stick nest, basket nests, right? So, and this idea will also be connected with the idea of egg, the egg schema, right? So we keep connecting different ideas continuously. We keep arranging the schema or the file that we have created in our mind, right? Then schemata are an effective tool. So this is a plural. Schemata are an effective tool for understanding the world. So through the use of schemata, most everyday situations do not require effortful thought. So those are unconscious things, right? So you do not need to pay a lot of attention, right? Which absolutely automatic, right? So a little, so you need to pay a little attention. Automatically, you can do it. People can quickly organize new perceptions, new information into schemata, and can effectively without any effort. But most people have a stairway schema and can apply it to climb staircases they have never been before. So that example of finding information, organizing information, as they're connecting information with the old information, they might create new links. Right? That's what they are saying. For example, most people have expressed difficulty learning to use a new software package because of the prior familiarity with the preceding versions seem to interfere. Now, when I joined Facebook in fall, in spring this year, when we went online. I remember my past use of Facebook. That was an old interface. That was very different from the new interface. So I struggled to locate where is this button, where is that button, how to do this, how to do that. So all that. So that particular idea affected it. The other example that I can give from my experience is Google Sites, because the sites that I created in Google Sites, I used the older version of Google Sites, where Google Drive was not embedded in Google Sites, right? Where YouTube was not, because these are all owned by Google now, or they are Google tools. That's why when I uploaded different files for you especially the textbook task, so I have to allow you to access folder on Google Drive, which was not the case earlier. You just have to open Google site and you could click on the file and you could either watch it on your screen or you could download it. Right? But now that file, if I download anything, it creates a folder on my laptop, on my Google Drive. And so you may be able to view the site, but to access that file, which is uploaded on the Google site, I need to give you access to the folder which Google site has created on my drive. So that is a little, so it took me a while to understand when many of you said that you cannot find this book, you cannot access this book, you cannot download that book. So that is when I learned that I have to give access to you to a certain folder. And then I was able to find the folder, the space where this particular folder was created by Google site. So that was one of the examples of when we are used to the old doing of something. When a new platform comes, a new tool comes, then we actually, so there is a little bottleneck, there's a little difficulty to become familiar and to become an expert. Now, those who might be using Facebook this year or after that, so they will automatically be taken to the new platform. And those who are going to design Google sites now, they will automatically be taken to the new platform. They will not have any issue with that. Now, structuralism, cognitive structuralism, as you say, structuralism is structure, so there is cognitive structure. If you remember the Vygotsky idea and Piaget's idea, so they were saying that there is the cognition have different stages, capability, right? There is sensory motor stage, there is pre-operational, concrete option, formal operation, and at each stage, an individual or a learner or a student or a pupil is able to learn something, and there is something that an individual or a pupil or learner cannot learn or cannot process that information because it is based on one's cognitive ability, right? What we did it in today's exercise when I said, look at the features of each stage and try to see if you can find evidence of that in the textbook. So the awareness of interrelationship between stimuli, which is the things around us, and we receive that information through our senses. Now, stimuli is a word used in behaviorism, right? Or the use of appropriate schema. So the awareness of interrelationship between stimuli, the information that schema is perceiving from the environment, or the use of appropriate schemata are significant to cognitive learning and to teaching the class and classroom learning. So these are important. So we need to ensure that when we are giving information to students, we have selected the appropriate stimuli, right? What we call teaching aids, what we call introductory activity, group work, assignment tasks. So these are all activity, these are all stimuli that will help students to arrange information, to learn and arrange information, simulate and integrate, accommodate information in the different schema or schemata. So schemata serve several functions in learning, such as categorizing, remembering, comprehending, problem solving. So remembering, categorizing, the basic stage, when you are recalling, you are trying, and you will not be able to recall everything at once. So you will decide, categorize what information you need to recall or retrieve from cognitive learning theory file from your schema. So you will be recalling that schemata only. And you are able to solve a problem if there is a problem. For example, at the end of this chapter, you might find questions which are problem solution. So schemata or prior knowledge links categorize our experiences efficiently for processing. So that's what schema do. So this categorization of information facilitates the processes of remembrance, recall, and comprehension, which is understanding, all of which make problem solving more productive. So for problem solving, we see when we are solving a problem, we are not only thinking I'm going to create a solution. So to create a solution, you have to recall information from your schema. Okay, for example, there is global warming problem. How could we resolve it, right? So we have to, for example, water pollution. So global warming, water pollution. So you are recalling information about what global warming is, how it affects our oceans, how it affects our plants, humans, food chain, and all that stuff. So you are connecting lots of schemata with this. And that is helping you to, so recall, remembering, and comprehension. Then schema facilitates the selection of information based on our interests. So that's also important here. When I said we are selecting information, the selection of the information is actually rooted in our interest. To whom or to what that we see or hear or watch, we are going to pay, or we are going to be attentive to, or we are going to pay attention to. So that is that it could be color, It could be maybe something else that you are seeing that might attract your attention and you focus more on it. So once you have selected the focus of your attention, the schema enables the selected material to be organized abstractly and assist the individual in processing and interpreting and integrating the new material based on what he or she knows. So you have selected. So once you have started processing that information that you are paying attention to, and then later you receive, and then you keep uh, processing that information, and as you are interpreting that information, and in the process of through the process of interpreting, you are actually taking that information to the relevant schema or schemata, and which is called integrating, which we call assimilation, accommodation, right? So you're making it part of your the already existing schema. You are expanding it. So for teachers to promote more effective learning, the teacher needs to link new information to familiar information selectively in as learners satisfying a format as possible. So teacher need to use appropriate teaching strategies, appropriate content. That's why age appropriation is important when we are selecting content. When we are talking about what vocabulary should we use to write a textbook for a certain age group, what content should be, what should be the scope of a content, right? How wide the content should be, how long the content should be. So in curriculum development, the scope and sequence are important, and scope and sequence is actually rooted in cognitive development theory, actually. How deep the content could be learned or presented to students, right? And then teachers decides, okay, I need to present this 2 pages content, and the vocabulary should be, they shouldn't be 8 letters words, there has to be 5-6 letter words, right? Students are familiar with, and there has to be technical terms, right? So then the textbook writer chooses vocabulary and they write textbook for students, but all this is rooted in cognitive development theory. Meaningful learning, as you can say, this idea is given this idea. So according to David, to learn meaningfully, or Oswald, to learn meaningfully, students must relate new knowledge that they are receiving through their senses, right? Or that they are paying attention to concepts and propositions, and they must relate that with the already existing information related to this. So you might be attracted to a flower or to its color, or maybe to multiple colors that you might find in the petals of that flower. So once you are attracted to it, then of course you are going to receive a lot of information about that particular colors, the plants, the flowers, and then you will integrate that information into the already existing information about flowers and plants. So when we are doing this meaningful learning, there are different strategies to make learning meaningful in our classes, or to help students to take information to the, what we call long-term memory. So the information that goes to long-term memory is actually is called meaningful learning. And the meaningful learning happens through meaningful learning processes or practices used by a teacher in one's classroom. So Oswald suggested the idea that we have advanced organizers. I just gave you an example of advanced organizers where the learning is organized and according to Vygotsky's idea, scaffolding, supported structures are created. One of these strategies used is KWL method. According to this, students are asked, or they are asked to make 3 columns, or they're given a worksheet around these 3 columns, and all this is blank. You cannot write this. Students are given a blank paper with 3 columns in it. The headings are given there, only this part, which is K, what you know, W, what you want to know, and L, what you learn. So in the beginning of the course, in the beginning of the class, maybe a chapter, they write what they know about. Let's say it's global warming. what they know about global warming. So they will write, okay, I know this, I know this, I know this. The second is, what do you want to know about global warming? So there will be few questions that they might want, they write here, that this is what I want to know about global warming. So at the end of the whole class, or maybe the chapter, they will write the answer to those questions which are written here. So the answers here will show that this is what they wanted to learn and this is what they have learned. So once when a teacher is looking at these answers, teacher will look at whether this is what he or she wanted to teach, whether the information is correct and authentic. And if something is incorrect, then teacher might correct that information by reteaching it. So this is one of the strategies used by teachers to make learning meaningful, right? Organizers. Rote learning is not meaningful learning. That's what you must have been hearing. We need to improve our education system, our classroom teaching, because we are learning. We are memorizing information, right? So though memorization is an important part of learning, this is the very first thing. But the second step is what to do. It's okay. We have to memorize 2 times table, 3 times table, 4 times table. But the purpose is not only to learn, but also to know that where I am going to use this concept of times table or multiplication, right? So that is rote learning or memorization is the very first step, but learning should not stop here. If learning stops at rote learning, for example, you might have learned the definition of fluorescence, that's fine. But if you don't go beyond the definition, you don't look at, okay, what is going to happen if this thing is missing or that thing is overdue or overdone. This particular element is more than what is needed. So what is how it is going to affect the process of photosynthesis, how it is going to affect the plant, the leaves, its structure, the fruit. So that is what you call meaningful learning, when you connect the information with some real life situation, real life concepts and objects or things that is things that are found in our environment. Meaningful learning is opposite of rote learning. So that's what they are saying. So we are actually activating different schema in our brain. And through this activation process, we are ensuring that a lot of schemas are getting connected to each other. Just remember the earlier one that I showed you about eggs. So a lot of things were connected to that. Let me go back to that again and showed you that this one. So just one, and lots of other schemas are connected. The schema related to eggs, color of eggs, where we find different types of eggs, right? What happens, what is a good egg, what is a bad egg, or a spoiled egg, right? So meaningful learning is opposite to rote learning, right? So if your learning stops at rote learning, then that is not learning at all. So it has to, we need to make our rote learning, we need to transform into meaningful learning by connecting it. And they have given this example of this here. These are all disconnected things. These are all disconnected schemas, right? And once those different schemas are connected around a certain schema, then of course that is meaningful learning, because by activating this part, we'll also be activating these other parts which are related to this. Though they're activated, but we will only be deciding to retrieve information that is going to be the answer of the question. The answer of the question might be in block 4, but all the other blocks are also activated, right? But our brain will decide, I just need to fetch information from block 4. So what is a meaningful learning experience? So this is, we are coming to classroom teaching now. So meaningful learning experience is when learners actively interpret their experience using internal cognitive operations. Internal cognitive operations, that they can identify what is it that they have learned, how is it, how what they have learned is connected with them, with their environment, where they live, with what they eat, all sorts of things. So they're able to make connections of the content with the things around them with other already created schema. And then requires that teachers change their role from sage to guide. Now, sage is a person who is all knowledgeable, right? We have sages. But the teacher has to become a guide, a facilitator that can help learners or students to what we call to become participant in the learning process, right? So the learner is no longer a passive recipient, but an active participant in a classroom where teaching learning is happening, right? So teacher is no longer all knowledgeable, everything, but is just a participant in a classroom where a certain teaching learning experiences is taking place. So they learn from thinking about what they are doing. So teacher's role becomes one of stimulating and supporting activities that engage learners in thinking, right? So when we are thinking, we are engaged in what we call connecting lots of files or schema in our brain, in our mind, right? So that is what we call stimulating and supporting activities, which should encourage thinking in students. So that should be the role of the teacher. They must also be comfortable that this thinking may transcend their own insight. So as I said here, when I was explaining the role of teacher, then it must change from sage to guide. So as the student and teacher are becoming partner in this teaching learning process, so they are helping each other to learn. So students' experiences of learning should also be helping teachers to learn something about the content that he or she is teaching, or might be the teaching strategy about himself. Right? So there has to be some learning for the teachers as well. Right? And then requires knowledge to be constructed by the learner, not transmitted from the teacher. So learner has to construct the knowledge and it shouldn't be transmitted from the teacher, right? Which is learner is actively participating in constructing or reorganizing or rearranging its schema through thinking process. And it's not only storing information or putting it in this file. Teacher says, okay, put this information in block A, put this information in block B, block 2, block 3. Okay, this is a question, the information should come from block A. Right? So this is a passive recipient, but if students is doing it by himself or herself, then that is what we call active learning or meaningful learning experiences. So attributes or characteristics of meaningful learning experiences, right? Students are actually constructing knowledge for himself or herself, and as students are constructing knowledge for themselves, they are actively manipulating different things. They might be manipulating data. They might be manipulating the text, right? For example, paraphrasing, summarizing. Right? So those are manipulating information, the data that you might have. You might be summarizing. You might be drawing, labeling, right? So manipulating. Then it is intentional. So you intentionally, the student or the learner is intentionally engaged in the teaching learning process and the manipulation of the information that he or she is supposed to learn. Right? Actively, intentionally engaged in the classroom with a certain teaching aid, maybe a model or a textbook or something on the board, worksheet. It's complex. So meaningful learning is complex. It's not answer this question, answer that question. What is this? What is that? So the questions which are asked in meaningful learning are which are taken from students' surroundings, from their environment, community, country, the world. So they connect that with real life problems. So that makes global warming concept meaningful if they can connect it with real life, with the world, with Pakistan, or with South Asia. Then it is constructive, which is students are actively doing it by themselves. They're constructing their own schema, arranging, reorganizing, reinterpreting, interpreting, reinterpreting. It's collaborative. Student and teacher work together, or students work together, right? So it is collaborative. Each one is helping others. Every student is helping other students, whether it is group work, whether it is project, whether it is what we call designing a magazine, or creating some sort of experiment, or so. Everyone is helping each other to complete, and as they are working in it, they are also learning lots of things, not only academic skills, but non-academic skills as well. So it's conversational, so it has to be a lot of conversation, talk between students and teachers, and between students and among students, right? So that is conversational. There has to be a lot of talking in the classroom, right? Whether it is a teacher who is going to explain, whether it is students who are working on, so they're sharing information, that work that they have done with others. So it is conversation. It is reflective. Then they reflect on what they have done from, as they're sharing what they have done with other group members. So other group members might will also share. So they will learn, okay, this is what he or she did, that's what I did. So this is something I also need to do. So this was missing in my work, right? In today's activity, so as I said, as my general feedback on it was, some of you did good work, so you were able to identify elements, the characteristics and its evidence in textbook, and some of you couldn't identify that. So that is, so if we had more time, then I could have given examples of that, right? So then those who didn't, whose presentation was not of a good quality, then they would have, of course, improved and found evidences that were, that could have supported, okay, this is this particular feature or the characteristics of this development stage, and this is the evidence of this. So it can contextualize. So it is found in one's surroundings, in one's environment. So this is meaningful learning. So it is connected with oneself, right? With one who is learning. It is connected with the student's family, student's community, the country. Right? So these are some of, they have explained it. So when we are experiencing the meaningful learning, what happens, right? So when we are when we are experiencing, or when we are going through planned learning experience, which is designed to make learning meaningful, then of course there are a lot of things that teachers use. One of them is advanced organizers, right? Then they have given here what is expository teaching. So meaningful reception, so you have to have expository teaching, you have to have mediators, right? Is the mediator, so teaching is the mediator, right? Then they've explained it. Then this is Bruner and learning via insight. This is also important concept in learning, whether we all have some ideas, some thoughts. You might remember that what we call an element that comes where you see a bulb and there is a question. The bulb is turned on, it's lighted, and then there is a question mark over there. Then there is light over there. So that means, so insight. So insight is something that comes from within a human, within us. So you might have seen something, a procedure, or maybe a movie, and then from that you learn an insight emerges. You might have read something, an insight emerges. Right? So that is what we call learning via insight. So this is, now the question is whether all learning could happen through insight. Well, that is not possible, because insight is actually the last part of your learning. So once you are learning everything about global warming, then there can be an insight after all the content. So the other stages, such as memorization, comprehension, synthesis, evaluation, the Bloom's taxonomy, it has to happen before you come into insight, before you reach the stage of insight. So all learning might result in learning by insight, it may not. So that is insight. Cognitive theories in classroom by teachers, meaningful learning experiences. We looked at it. Teachers need to bring in teaching aids such as models, charts. Teacher need to use multiple assessment strategies such as asking students to make models, asking students to work on a project, or maybe asking students to create charts, completing worksheets, all sorts of things. So that is doing using multiple teaching and assessment strategies in the class. Dual coding theory guide students to process information using dual coding theory. So we remember better when two processes are engaged. So when we are able to connect two different schema, when we are able to connect two or more than two schema together, that is through visual learning and verbal learning. So what you see and what we are able to read or say about it. Schema theory is there, the phases of learning, internal process. So you can read mnemonics is another strategy. We looked at it. This is also, we have looked at this perception, as I said, when we were looking at something, we always select what is it that we are going to be learning by looking. So this is what we call attention, right? Then there's coding, then semantic coding. Semantic is when we are making meaning, when we are making it to, when we are making sense of the information that we have received, or the other term is deeper learning. It is not surface learning, which is what is that, what is this, which date, what day, but it is more than that. So that is surface learning and deeper level learning or semantic coding. So these are retrieval and generalization. So this helps in retention and transfer, provide varied practice on space review. So these are mnemonic. Another example, as you say, Holmes, this is what we call short form of this, names of Great Lakes in the United States of America. So this is the one they have given, they have created one, Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, Superior. So I'm sure they must be talking about Niagara Falls. They're talking about Ontario, but Niagara Falls is shared between Canada and states. So on the Canadian side, we have Ontario, and on the American side, we have New York State. Concept making, then advanced organizers, expository teaching, hierarchical retrieval system learning versus insight. So learning by insight, we learn by insight. But that is, it happens, this is a philosophical idea. So this is what they call deriving or extracting philosophical understanding from certain thing, right? Or about a certain thing, about an individual, about a process, right? Society. So that is insight. So there are, people have said lots of things about Pakistan. So there is an insight into, for example, the day before yesterday, or maybe this week, or maybe last week, USA has published a list of countries where religious, what they call religious persecution list or something. And Pakistan is there in the list, but India is not. The Pakistan's complaint, when Pakistan has called this kind of looking at this or listing countries under this category biased, because they believe, because Pakistan and the people and the government of Pakistan believe that India should also be in the list, because what is happening in Pakistan, it is also happening in India also. But the United States have a different reason for doing it. So when the speaker, when the person who was speaking with the reporters explained why India is not there and Pakistan is there. Right? So that is what they call, so they have an insight about whether we should put India, though similar things like Pakistan are happening in India, but they are still able to find differences between the situation in Pakistan and situation in India. Right? So that is what we call insight. There is something about it. You have every day, there will be something inside. Every day, we get insight every day. We should. Otherwise, we are wasting our days and weeks and months and years. So that is the end of this chapter. This was the last video that looked at all the chapters. As I said, there are multiple choice questions. You can look at this. So I'm going to end this video here. Thank you.